What's up, everybody? Just like that, we're back to do this entire show over again. Ryan Talbot, Matt Parrino, shout the Buffalo Football Podcast. And we had so many technical difficulties a few minutes ago, Ryan, that we are going to run this thing back right now and see if we can't get everything flushed, everything good. We want to make sure this entire episode is there for everybody. We've been off for like 8 days. So we need a full Wednesday night staple show to deliver to everybody. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Second time is going to be the charm tonight. I can feel it. We're off to a great start already. No technical issues within the first 42 seconds of the show. So, nothing but good things here.
So for people that are probably listening or watching this and have no idea what we're talking about, we just did this entire episode an hour ago, but throughout it, like I was gone for a few minutes. At the end, you were gone for a minute. And so I was trying to piece it all together after the fact and seeing like how much of this do we have. And there was just too much like missing time. The internet just really defeated us tonight. So we're going to run this thing back and do it again. Speaking of running it back, we're coming back to Wingnuts April 19th, 10 days from tonight. It is our big pre-draft podcast. Come out, hang out. We'll eat some wings. We'll drink some beers. We'll talk Bills and draft. Ryan and I'm working on a guest maybe too. More to come on that if that comes through. But it's going to be an exciting event. We cannot wait to get back to Wingnuts.
Cannot wait to get back to Wingnuts. The great food, great beers, but also, right before the NFL draft. No better time. We'll probably have a clearer picture of how the first few picks will go. So plenty to talk about at Wingnuts 10 nights from today.
And then, of course, we are coming back to Turning Stone Resort Casino. That is coming up in when's the draft? 2 weeks from tomorrow. So It is coming before you know it, Ryan. So you come out to Wingnuts and then 5 days later, come hang out with us at Turning Stone, New York Rec and Social Club. We're going to be doing a live watch party there. So we're going to watch the first round. We're going to do a live podcast during the first round of the draft, react to some picks. We'll be hanging out. They have a great bar. They have TVs everywhere. We'll be hanging out all night. And then we'll obviously do the post first round edition of the podcast too. It's going to be a big week, draft week for the Shout Podcast.
It's going to be a blast too, because there's so much uncertainty with the draft. It looked like at one point it was going to be Cam Ward, then Abdul Carter. Now the talk is the Browns are going to go Travis Hunter. So who knows how this board's going to fall. Obviously, the New England Patriots have an early pick, a division rival, the Jets before you know it. So we're going to have plenty to talk about on night one of the draft.
We have plenty to talk about tonight on this episode. We're going to pack it with as much information. Ryan Talbot delivering draft Bills nuggets here over the past couple of weeks, absolutely stockpiling the draft visit tracker over at Syracuse.com and NewYorkUpstate.com. You can go read that. I'll put a link in the bio so you can check it out. So many visits to kind of comb through. Let everybody know though, Ryan, like when we're thinking about setting up a board or setting up, what we think the Bills will do in the draft, how important are these top 30 visits when they bring in players to the facility?
Yeah, they're very important when it comes to the early draft picks. When you look at the history of the Bills draft underneath, Brandon Beane as GM, the majority of the first round picks have been top 30 visitors. Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, Ed Oliver in 2019. No top 30 visits in 2020 and 2021 due to COVID. Kaiir Elam was a top 30 visitor, made a pre-draft visit. And then you jump to last year, 2024. They didn't pick in the first round, but their first selection in the draft, Keon Coleman, was also a top 30 visitor. So the majority of those early picks have been here on visits with the Bills. Osiris Torrance is another example of that. Those earlier picks, it really does mean something when you can link the pre-draft visit to the Bills. Dalton Kincaid's the only exception to the rule where he was not a pre-draft visitor, but they did some Zooms with him.
We're going to get into some of the names that you should start kind of circling as you go through some draft guides and all that part of the process in a few minutes here. But I think that sometimes it's a little easy to overreact to some of these. And listen, you might be the Bills and you might bring in a bunch of guys, but unless they are, falling on your board the way that you need them to. Sometimes you bring in a guy and you have somebody else that's sticking out in your board, maybe somebody that in a perfect world you didn't even think was going to be available to you in the draft. So things change as you go through this. And the other piece to the visits that you kind of touched on there is a lot of times teams, and the Bills, Brandon Beane spoke about it last week from the owners meetings, will bring in guys to the top 30 minutes to check off a box that they're not the kind of guy that they want in their building, right? They have somebody pick them up at the airport. They get a report from that staffer. How did that person get into the car? How did they act on the drive over? How do they act inside the facility once they started walking through the hall? So I think it's one of those situations where, yeah, they're bringing in all of these guys because there's various levels of interest, but they're also doing their due diligence, to your point. Sometimes maybe guys get off their board or fall dramatically on their board after the visit. And Daryl says, internet is cooking with gas now, baby.
Don't want to jinx anything, but things have been going very, very smoothly here early on. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just all about players that are going to be home runs, surefire picks, or favorites for the Bills. It's also about bringing in players that have character concerns, players coming off of injury. You want to get the medicals on players. If it's the latter of the two, Revel Jr. of East Carolina is a great example of that, coming off of an ACL injury. But the character concern, Isaiah Bond's the first name that comes to mind, Matt, when you look at these pre-draft visitors for the Bills. And, we've talked about this. There were some character concerns being floated out there by Steve Palazzolo of PFF, comparing what he's heard to Jermaine Burton of the Cincinnati Bengals, who we all know had a disastrous rookie season for Cincinnati. Bond has said that, he's tried to come out and say that that's not his character, that's not him, but the Bills want to do their due diligence in case he falls into a range where they're comfortable with him. Because you sit there and you say, okay, they were at his pro day. They talked to him at the combine. They had dinner with him. They have him in for a pre-draft visit. So there's probably going to be another dinner there as well. They want to do as much as possible to make sure that if he falls to round 3, should we move up into round 3 and go get him? If he's there in round 4, is that where we're comfortable with him? The talent's there, but you have to make sure that you feel good about the character as well.
And our good buddy Scott Moranto, Bean was aware of that trend of the Bills really being linked to teams that they meet with at their top 30s and try to throw other teams off the set in 2023 by not bringing in Dalton Kincaid. And speaking of Scott Moranto, I got to give him props. He was in his bag this morning at Hoops. He threw a couple passes that were next level that I just did not deliver on. So apologize to Scott publicly in front of everybody, but the knees are feeling good, Ryan. We're back in a big way. I played hoops 3 times over the last 3 weeks, and I'm running up and down the floor looking like my old self. Got to knock on some wood, though, because post 40, you dream of stretches like this, and they tend not to last very long.
You're not wrong there. I was feeling pretty good recently as well, and about a week and a half ago, I was asked to help move a piano, and I was so sore for a few days after that.
Who asked you to move a piano?
Okay. Huh?
Who asked you to move a piano?
My sister-in-law. They had to get a piano, and
it's family. See, my move on the piano after some experience on that over the years is to block and delete that phone number. Whoever texts me, whoever calls me, asks me about the piano, you're out, like completely out. That is a miserable operation.
Yeah.
So how many people did you have move it?
So when it was all said and done, there was about 3 of us moving it.
Wow. I mean, you're a great brother-in-law, Ryan. I'll just say that.
It was quite an interesting endeavor for sure.
All right, let's get back to Bond here. And to me, he's the biggest standout from your visits tracker because of what I think, while I don't think it's the biggest Bills need, that other wide receiver, it is something that I do think that they want to address. Now, they went out and they got Josh Palmer. Brandon Beane is absolutely in love with the guy. He was asked on the Kevin Clark podcast last week, is there a person that nobody's talking about in the Bills right now that we will be talking about at the end of this upcoming season? His first name that came, and the only name, was Josh Palmer. So big plans for him in this offense. They went out and they got him. I think that what they were hoping for from Amari Cooper, they're hoping Palmer can be. But in terms of that speed threat, Bond to me fits into that 4.35 40-yard dash at the combine. Your eyes immediately pop up, and that changes the math a little bit. His situation in Texas, we've talked about this a little bit on the show, was a little bit funny because Quinn Ewers was about as polarizing a quarterback in college football as there was. He'd have stretches where he did, I think in one of the playoff games where he led that furious comeback late in the game, great drive at the end where he's hitting his throws, everything like that. And then he'll go quarters where you're just like, who is this guy? I don't even think he's a dare I say, parody of an NFL prospect. Although some people are actually super high on Quinn Ewers. I've read some people that think he's going to be a real value in the third round. I'm not one of those. After watching, I don't watch a lot of college football. I watched 2 Texas games this year because I wanted to kind of get a peek at Arch Manning. And man, I just left unimpressed with Ewers. But to me, when you have a wide receiver that's got speed, the ability to win on the outside, and he was in an offense like that with an inconsistent quarterback at the college level, you start to think about what could that look like in your system. And I think the Bills are doing some due diligence on him right now for a reason.
And the usage was up and down with him in terms of how they utilized him. They have Matthew Golden in that offense as well. Running the ball, they were somewhat balanced too. So it was tough, and you're trying to project what they're like as in the pros, and that's tough to do sometimes with these players based on how they're used and what you want to do with them on your team or how you envision using them on your roster. So Bond's going to be interesting, not just for the Bills, but where he falls in general. It just takes one team to fall in love with you. But I do think there's going to be a lot of cautious teams this year after seeing Jermaine Burton and what happened with the Bengals, where he didn't take advantage of the opportunity when there was an injury there, and he was supposed to be, the reports where he was going to be a focal point in the offense in a game. Then he goes out to a casino the night before, he misses curfew, and then he's inactive that game. So, sometimes players can't get out of their own way, and if that were to be the case with Bond, you might see some teams that believe that's the case, they might steer clear of him, and he could fall further than some expect.
Got a receiver question here before we move on. Gerald over on Facebook. Do you think there's a chance the Bills go receiver in the first round? And I think this is an interesting question because a couple things, like depending on whose mock draft that you read. I saw one today. I think it was from Rhett Lewis at NFL.com. And if it's not him, and I'm thinking of it, I'm seeing so many mock drafts right now. So who knows? I can't keep them all straight. But I'm pretty sure he had Tet McMillan going in the second round, which I've not seen that from almost anybody.
No.
But if in that kind of scenario where that level of talent is available at that spot, what do you do if you're Brandon Beane, if a Matthew Golden is there, maybe even a Luther Burden, if you have him a first round grade on your board? Is that something that you would be surprised if Brandon Beane went and drafted a wide receiver, or do you think it's in the plausible outcomes if the guy that they like is there?
It's in the plausible outcomes if the right guy is there. Absolutely. Like Golden's the one that sticks out to my mind that would have to be sitting there at 30 or near it. And I don't expect that to happen. I don't expect Tet to be available near that point. Luther Burden could, and the Bills might, have a first round grade on him, and that'd be fine. The Bills are known to go with the best player available, and any of those 3 players that were just mentioned could stand out on the board versus who could be there at corner, defensive tackle, the top 2 positions that a lot of fans think the Bills will go in round 1. So, I'm never ruling anything out, minus quarterback, minus punter, kicker, obviously, in round 1, running back 2. There's not going to be anyone at that point worth taking in round 1 for the Bills. But, wide receivers certainly on the board because they do want to upgrade that position. They want to add some more weapons and talent. And we can talk about another pre-draft visitor here that I think checks a lot of boxes that was announced today.
And who's that?
That would be Jalen Royals. I reported that today. Royals has been one of my favorite wide receivers in this draft class. We've talked for the last few months about our favorites, and I said on day 2, Royals out of Utah State is someone that I really like. Good footwork, great with contested catches, good route runner, 4.4 speed, can play inside, can play outside. My pro comparison for him is Brandon Ayuk. So we know Ayuk, when healthy, how good he can be. I would love a player like that in round 2. If I'm the Bills, and be able to address another need in round 1 with either a pre-draft visitor like Trey Amos or a defensive tackle, whether it's a pre-draft visitor or not, depending on what the Bills want to do.
Yeah, Royals is interesting. The more you start this process, you look at some of the top school guys. Obviously, Matthew Golden has been getting a lot of buzz after he ran the 40 that he did. But you're right. I mean, this is a guy that if you look over at NFL.com and Lance Zierlein, he puts a second or third round grade on him, as does Dane Brugler from the Athletic. Some of the strengths that are listed from Zierlein: keenly aware of where defenders are positioned, smooth insertion of wrinkles and leverage into his routes, fights hard for his catch space on contested throws, and works aggressively back to the throw. So those are the top 4 on his list. To me, the Bills have to prioritize speed on the outside, the ability to win down the field, and then also the tracking ability. That's one area that I thought that Mac Hollins was better in that role than anybody could have expected him to be, especially in the playoffs. But that's not really what he's on a roster to be. If you can go get a rookie contract that you have cost control for 4 seasons that can give you some of this ability to win down the field, separation at the line of scrimmage, beating man. Another thing that's, Isaiah Bond on a lot of his profiles, that's one of the areas that people talk about, his ability to create separation. You need to find that in a wide receiver that you take in the draft, especially if you're going to use a first or second round pick on that guy.
Yeah, you have to feel really good about the player and what the skill set that they have, what they bring to the table. Royals can beat the press man, as our friend Scott mentioned in the chat there. So if they check the boxes, it's definitely in play in round 1 or round 2. That being said, if you sit here and look at the roster now, cornerback, defensive tackle still sit out as the sore thumbs of the roster in terms of needing more talent and more depth.
Yeah, I want to transition now. That's a perfect time to cornerback, because if you look at your tracker, 2 big names, and then a day 2, day 3 fringe guy that we'll talk about here. The 2 names are Trey Amos from Ole Miss and Shavon Revel out of East Carolina. 2 guys that I think are very interesting prospects. I think that from everything that I've read, Revel is the guy that, first of all, one thing that I didn't notice until just today, looking at a lot of this cornerback class, Revel's really older. Okay, so he's coming in at 24 years old. You look at guys like Hairston, Will Johnson from Michigan. I mean, these are guys that are be 21, 22 years old, completely different age threshold.
Right.
So that's something to consider too. But in terms of like an absolute beast on the outside, I think that's actually in a lot of his scouting reports. Revel is a guy that I think is competitive. He's physical. He's athletically twitched up. The one downside on him is that he has struggled to stay healthy. He's coming off of an ACL. That's something that I think has to concern you going into the year. And then Trey Amos, I'll flip it over to you. What do you like about him? Because from first look, it's easy to see why so many Bills fans have been high on this guy. He's got kind of like the full package. He's got the athletic profile. He's got some production. He's got some physical measurables. What do you like about Amos? And could he be in play at 30, do you think, Revel as well?
When it comes to Trey Amos, I think the Bills would run to the podium if he was there at number 30. I think he is a perfect fit schematically in terms of what he does well. Good size, 6'1", good speed, willing and strong tackler. And we've talked about Sean McDermott. He loves cornerbacks that can tackle, and that's something that Amos does extremely well. Amos mentioning that he was coming on the pre-draft visit on an episode of The Insiders with Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo. So, the interest there is there with the Bills. They're looking at him as a potential first-round pick. Definitely is someone I would take at pick 30. Revel Jr. is someone that I wouldn't hesitate to take on in round 2 or on day 2 of the draft. The ACL injury, the age, that does worry you a little bit, but the skills are all there as well. He was someone that was making a lot of plays early this season. He only performed or played in 3 games, but had 2 interceptions over that stretch. One that went for a defensive score. Was really setting himself up nicely as a projected first-round pick in this draft. But with the injury concerns and the age, someone that I would target more so on day 2 of the draft.
Daryl says, I think there's some debate about Revel's age. He's actually 22. Joe Marino said the same thing you said about the age, but later corrected himself. That is a big point. So let me bring up his profile here. Are we getting sold a bill of goods here? Because I saw 24. Revel is.
It says 22, and I just looked it up.
So Brugler has it at 24 years old. Let me look at his.
Wikipedia has 24, but then there's some that has. That's weird. In today's day and age, you think that you'd be able to really pinpoint this. Is a Substack by Bob Sturm that has him at 22 years old. Yeah, that is bizarre. I don't know the last time that I've seen a prospect have different ages on multiple sites. 247 Sports has him at 22.
Wow. Okay. Well, that changes the conversation a little bit, right? Like, I mean, 24 as a first round pick, to me, you got to be absolutely spectacular because, I mean, you're talking about that second contract, the first year being 29 years old. That's really old. So we'll do a little bit more due diligence on that and try to figure that out. But I do trust that Joe Marino did his due diligence and figured out it was 22.
What's the baseball? What's the baseball movie with Rob Schneider and the guy from? Oh gosh, I'm blanking on the movie that he became famous in. But there's this scene where they're playing baseball and the old guy shows up with a piece of paper and it just says "I am 12" when they unfold and they give it to the ump. It just makes me think of
I have no idea, dude. You're going into some weird old guy. Rob Schneider, was it basketball?
No, that was with the guys from South Park. No, it had Napoleon Dynamite actor in it, and then John Lovitz. Some baseball fan you are, Matt. I'm rattling off the actors' names, and you can't think of the name.
This is probably a horrible movie, dude.
Oh, I'm sure I watched it because I love horrible comedies, and it was probably right up there. Benchwarmers. Thank you, Wolfgang. You have great taste like I did years ago when I watched it. So there's this scene where there's this this older guy. He's all jacked up, muscular, and the ump's like, "You can't play in this league. You're too." And then he hands him a piece of paper, and it has his picture glued on it, and it just says "I am 12" above it, and he says that's his birth certificate. So, with Revel's age up in the air, I figured I would bring that up here.
Good stuff. On the cornerbacks, quick transition. No, I never saw Benchwarmers. That's one of the rare sports comedies that I have not seen. So that's why I didn't get it. Plus, I don't like Rob Schneider, which I know maybe that's a bad take, but I'm not a big fan. I like him in Adam Sandler movies for the most part, but otherwise by himself, not a fan. Cornerback at 30. What's your level of comfort? You said run to the podium for Amos. A lot of analysts have him as a second round pick, but again, because of his, well-rounded profile, I think that he's pretty much a safe pick. There's some other guys in this draft, Barron out of Texas. He's a really fun player, but some people think that he's going to be a slot, or, he played the star, big nickel role for Texas. You read a lot about that. The Bills don't tend to prioritize that position in the draft because they obviously have Taron Johnson, and even with maybe sprinkling somebody in, they've never shown an affinity to want to do that. And then the other piece of it is too, I don't know how many people after Hunter and Johnson kind of fall into that bucket of, at 30, this is definitively going to be the pick, but it's the one position where they have a need. So I almost feel like you're in 2022 territory. And what has Brandon Beane learned about approaching this position? If you have a bucket of Revel, Hairston, and Amos, and they're all kind of similar, maybe you do look to trade back and, a couple of spots. Because if you get to the top of the first round or of the second round, and now you have a couple of teams at the top there that maybe didn't get the quarterback in the first round that maybe want to come up for what's left, you could play that game again if you're Brandon Beane, I think.
Yeah, and we talked about it last year, saying that where the Bills are drafting from, there might be some QB needy teams that would trade with the Bills. Obviously, it was more so for wide receiver needy teams, with the Chiefs taking Worthy and then Carolina coming in to take Leggett. But I sit here and I say, okay, you're expecting Cam Ward to go number 1, Sanders to go at some point in round 1, although his stock is supposedly dropping. It wouldn't shock me if you get into the late 20s or to pick 30 where the Bills are, and there's a team that wants Jackson Dart and they want that 5th-year option, and the Bills can then trade down, and then they have, 3 second-round picks going into the draft, and they add even some more assets where they're allowed to then move around and move up in round 3 potentially, or get into round 3, move around and get a lot of that, the meat of this draft, where a lot of people are saying that's where the talent is. The top end talent's not as great in this draft, but you can get a lot of quality starters in those middle rounds. The Bills can get multiple picks in rounds 2, 3, and 4. By all means, I think they should consider it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really, there's some strong middle round guys as well. One person on your draft tracker is Dorian Strong out of Virginia Tech. I actually had him in my first mock draft. And when I posted that, when I do my first mock draft, it's always kind of like, pew, pew, pew. I do a couple mock simulators, get a couple, especially like those second and third or those third and beyond picks usually are people that I'm just learning about for the first time. I've rarely seen a day 2 or day 3 guy get as much love as Strong did when I put that mock draft out. He's obviously been in to visit the Bills. So they're doing their due diligence at the position. And I think that going cornerback twice in this draft, no matter where you first decide to pick one, should be something the Bills are comfortable doing with, to try to find at least someone to start opposite Christian Benford and then put somebody in the pipeline to develop. It's always something. It's always a good habit to have, to be deep at that position.
Yeah, and I don't expect the Bills to make all 10 of their picks, but with so many picks, I would love to see them double dip at cornerback, double dip at defensive tackle, get some more depth there. And obviously, at defensive tackle, it could be a 3-tech and a 1-tech. But double dip at that position, grab an edge, grab a running back late if need be. If you have some questions about, James Cook, that's a tougher one with 3 guys on this roster that you feel good about, including Cook for that final year. But go around and address needs, and don't be afraid to double dip. The Bills have had great success with late round cornerbacks, Dane Jackson being one, obviously Christian Benford in round 6. So I think that's one position where fans would feel pretty good about whoever they took with that second corner, based on the Bills having a good feel for the skill set that they're looking for and what these players bring to the table.
Our good buddy Scott Moranto in the comments wanted some love for Azariah Thomas, Florida State cornerback, who's actually got a really cool story. I was actually reading up on him in the Beast today. His dad went away when he was like, I think 2 years old. Him and his mother and his family were homeless. Some of his siblings have played big time college football as well. So he's somebody that I think is really interesting. Ran a 4.58 at the combine, so probably took a little bit of a hit there. Be interesting to see if the Bills wanted to go back to the well again at Florida State. They obviously spent a lot of time scouting there last year with Keon Coleman, probably very familiar with Thomas. What are your thoughts on that, on him?
Thomas would be, again, someone that I wouldn't mind the Bills looking at. Not someone I would take with, obviously, at pick 30, but with a later pick on day 2. And then if he fell into day 3, absolutely. I don't necessarily expect that. But, yeah, there's some quality corners that if you feel like they fit the skill set, like Strong does, the name that you mentioned that the Bills brought in on a pre-draft visit, by all means. So the Bills have a tendency of knowing exactly the type of players they're looking for. And from a character perspective, the story that he's gone through, Thomas definitely fits in that area too.
All right, as we keep this thing moving, I want to get to defensive tackle because the biggest name currently on the visit board is Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. And to me, he doesn't have a comp on the NFL NFL.com profile. Oh, no, it's Ali McNeil, which you mentioned on the last show. I was listening to one podcast that said there are shades to, and I know a lot of times people say this about Kenneth Grant, but shades of Dexter Lawrence. And I think if you're getting any type of combination or bits of both of those players, McNeil and Lawrence, you're speaking the right language. And what I really like about Williams, the more and more that you watch him, the more and more that you read up on him, I think that his size profile and what he does well will really benefit everybody else on that defensive line. Now, the question I have is, can you lay and pray in the draft at that first pick in the second round and address maybe cornerback or another need in the first round, maybe an edge rusher that gets to a spot that you have a high grade on? Or do you feel like if the Bills don't take Williams at 30, he's not going to be around there when you go to pick at 58?
I never say never. Mock drafts are such a crapshoot, but I was reading one yesterday where he fell to 57, so one pick after Buffalo's first second round pick.
56, right?
Yeah, because they pick at 56, so he had, that mock draft had him going one pick after. So it's possible based on what some draft analysts are saying. I think the Bills would want to trade up in round 2 for Tyleik Williams, and Williams is interesting because I get it. Everyone's been on the Kenneth Grant train. I love Kenneth Grant's upside is what he can be, but I feel like Tyleik Williams at this point in time is the safer player of the two. You know what you're going to get. He is excellent against the run. There's some people that think he is just more of a 2-down D tackle. I disagree with that. I think there is some pass rush upside to his game. I think that the Aleem McNeil comparison is a good one, but if you're getting a Dexter Lawrence, any shade of that or a percentage of that, I think you would sign off on willingly. So he's someone that I would even have in play at pick 30. I know that mock drafts are starting to see him drop into round 2 more consistently, but he's definitely someone on Buffalo's radar. I've come away very impressed with him, with what I've watched, with what I've seen. Good hands, good fighting. I think that he addresses a major need, knowing that Daquan Jones really has fallen off since his injury 2 years ago, in terms of what he once was. And the age is a concern at 34 years old. So you do need to replace that sooner rather than later. And Williams is someone I would willingly take at 30, or obviously trading up in round 2.
There's a packing order, right? Like you mentioned Kenneth Grant in terms of somebody that can play over the center. He's, I think, believed to be the prize of this draft. But for as much love as he's gotten throughout this process, and I want to talk about the name that Daryl brings up as well, who could be
And Martin.
day 2 or day 3 pick. What's that?
And Martin underneath him. Both of them have good names to bring up here at defensive tackle.
Oh, and Martin. That's who I was going to talk about too, Farmer. Who, by the way, if you read your tracker, the Bills have spent a lot of time focused in on him throughout the entire process. But, Kenneth Grant, I've never seen a guy that has gotten the level of love or like the excitement in the love that he gets, but then also appearing in as many second round mock drafts as he's appearing in. It's almost like maybe the Bills go the route like, okay, if the cornerback of your choosing isn't there and you feel like you can get just as good of a guy or close in round 3 or 4, 3 with a trade up or 4, maybe you trade back and just wait to see if you have Grant or Williams in the same bucket, then you can address that need there. Come back. We could talk about the Arkansas pass rusher, Landon Jackson, as well. Bill spent a lot of time on him. But I really like Jamari Caldwell. The guy that put me onto him was Josh Reed, who watched a ton of Oregon tape, mainly for Derek Harmon. But when you watch him, you kind of see how good Caldwell is. I feel like there's so much depth here that no matter which way the board falls, I think the Bills with these 3 picks can somehow come out of this draft and find a way to answer some really important questions and then still double down on them, whether it be trading up into the 3rd or being aggressive in the 4th.
Yeah, and shout out to Josh Reed. The draft preview videos he's been putting out have been excellent on X. If you haven't checked them out, Bills fans, make sure you do. Caldwell is another guy that you're right. You sit there and you watch Harmon, who from the size and what the Bills like at defensive tackle stands out on the board, from the weight to the everything he does well. But Caldwell pops on tape. He is a bigger defensive tackle. They talked to him at the combine. He's someone that I would love to see the Bills take if they double dip, or even if they pass on defensive tackle in the first few rounds. He would be someone that if you brought him in, I think you'd feel pretty good about the development and what he can be in this defense. And then going to, Martin with Farmer, everything I have been told, I've been told this by multiple people, not just one or two, they love Farmer. They think that Farmer is as clean of a prospect as can be. They don't have any issues about character. They love what he or how he plays, how he fits into what they do on defense. He is not a 330-pound player by any means, but they feel like what he can do in terms of shooting the gaps, getting into the backfield, are areas where he would do well. And I don't think they would hesitate to take him on day 2 of the draft.
Yeah, and Farmer, I think I was watching something where just from like the interview process, like somebody that really stood out, great personality, people talk highly of him. And if that ends up being the case, maybe the Bills go corner in the first, and then they come back and they take a guy like Farmer, who probably projects as a little bit more as a 3 tech. You're going to have to start like reimagining, because you're not going to get Kenneth Grant. You're not going to get Tyreek Williams. You're going to have to start looking at maybe an Alfred Collins out of Texas, or maybe I was trying to look for the other big dude that I was looking at down here. What's his name? Caldwell, who we already talked about. And then CJ West out of Indiana.
Okay.
He's 6'1", 316. I don't know if he's a prototypical size-wise hefty 3 tech, but listen, the Bills historically, 330 has almost been a non-starter for them. So I'll be very interested to see if they kind of shift gears and entertain that.
Yeah, when the draft is over and we see what they've targeted for defensive tackle, we'll know if they're staying the course of what they've done over the years, or if they are making a shift to maybe get more stout against the run. They were pretty solid against the run this past year, don't get me wrong. But they've had some issues with that in the past, where maybe you get someone that can clog up the running lanes and has some upside as a pass rusher too.
Yaya Black, Iowa defensive tackle, 6'5", 336, projection 5th round grade. This dude, first of all, he's got a cool name, Yaya Black. Although I don't know if the Bills go back to the well with the Iowa defensive lineman. Too soon, maybe. I mean, AJ Epinesa, he gets a lot of flack. I think he's had a pretty solid career. I think people at where he was drafted in the 2nd round were hoping for a little bit more. Daryl also brings up Maryland's Jordan Phillips, obviously the name recognition. John Robert brings up Mike Green as a potential option at 30 for the Bills. It's an interesting one. We talked a little bit about him when I was back with Trapasso at the Combine. Competition concerns playing at Marshall, some domestic violence accusations, allegations in his past. So those are some of the things that you'd have to kind of sift through. But in terms of just like prospect, if the Bills got a Mike Green at 30 in the 1st round, that's a Philadelphia Eagles pick.
Right. Yeah. If you're talking about the skill set alone, you'd be giddy to get a Mike Green at pick 30 because of the upside, the talent, and everything else. But the character is what I think the Bills would shy away from in terms of why did he leave multiple schools and, the competition level, things of that nature. It just hasn't been something the Bills have been willing to roll the dice on early with draft picks. They've taken some guys later that they maybe had a few red flags, but that would be a big jump from what we've seen. And that being said, I don't expect Mike Green on the board at pick 30. You're looking at some of the visits that he's been taking, and those are teams that are in the middle of the 1st round. So I do think someone's going to fall in love with the pass rush abilities. You're always looking for elite pass rushers, and he is one of the best in terms of what he's done on the field in terms of production last year.
Apparently Luka Doncic is
Going
absolutely
off.
destroying the Mavericks right now, and rightfully so. So I'm going to go check that out. A couple things real quick before we get out of here. We'll come back with another episode this week. Ryan, I want to dive into Mel Kiper's mock draft. I want to kind of play it out how he did. It was a little bit different than I've seen some other things, and maybe talk about some potential trade up scenario areas and what the Bills would do if the board fell this way. That'll get us really going into draft season. Don't forget, April 19th, 10 days from today, Saturday night, before the draft, we're going to be at Wingnuts, 1402 Millersport Highway in Amherst. Again, that's the Bar and Grill Amherst location. Come out and hang with us. Ralph Wilson Sr. coming in the comments like, what in the world? You guys are the guests who never leave. LOL. No, we're doing the show again because we had some technical difficulties. And then Ryan, tell them we're coming to Turning Stone.
Yeah, coming to Turning Stone, night 1 of the draft. Join us. We're doing a live podcast early in the draft. We'll be able to talk about some of the Bills' division rivals. If there's any surprises that we thought maybe could fall in Buffalo's range, they go earlier than possible. And then obviously we'll come back late that night, not with a live audience, but you and I will find a spot to set up at Turning Stone after the Bills make their pick in round 1 and break down who the Bills have acquired and then who's still on the board entering day 2 that they could target.
Listen, if you're hanging out with us at Turning Stone, okay, and you're closing down New York Rec and Social Club, we'll find a way for you to watch live the post round edition somewhere inside Turning Stone Resort Casino. We'll figure it out. For Ryan Talbot, I'm Matt Parrino. We'll be back this week with another pod. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.